Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart. I'm here to facilitate a conversation with Peter Scalzo, our host, 20-year cancer survivor, and we've been on a longer series. This is number 5 of the 4-part series, and we've been doing it on connecting the grief stages with the recovery principles and what it means to a cancer journey.
Yeah.
That was
Do you have your notes?
Yes, right here.
Okay. No, the other times you've had some notes.
Yeah, I did. I did read those notes an hour or two ago. So I think it's up there.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. No, this has been a great journey, really.
I think it's the big part of like a culmination point, and because we really thought of denial being the front of these bookends. We're sitting in a library that has bookends that kind of holds these stages together, and acceptance being the other bookend. And as I thought about it myself, I thought, well, but it's layers too. So it's not as if it's just a shelf. It's stacked layers of things that as you grieve a layer of maybe a loss in your life, you may still have other layers that need to be grieved, or you find something new in there that you need to go back and do that process or work through the stages again and again.
Yeah. I mean, I think to a good degree, I've reached acceptance in my cancer journey, but there's lots of times where I'm going back for a checkup or a test, procedure, whatever, and I might struggle with sadness or fear or even anger at times. But I'll say this, the volume is turned way down on those things.
Well, that's the thing that I thought it might be interesting for us to talk about. Hey, what is acceptance? When do we get to acceptance? What are the characteristics of acceptance? And one of the thoughts that were as part of the notes that we've had for a little while, and acceptance wasn't that what happened was okay, or that it's that it didn't hurt, or that it doesn't still hurt, and that you don't feel related to the event, or in this case, if it's cancer, it doesn't state that everything's all right. It means that you still feel, you still can have sadness. But I like the fact that you talked about the volume was turned down, is that it is now incorporated into your life, and you're moving forward with the full knowledge and understanding that you can't change that event. You can't go back to the past. You've now incorporated into what you're doing in your life, and how you incorporate that and how you move forward gives you new meaning, I think, or new purpose.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this. It's the first verse of the Serenity Prayer. So addicts and, folks experiencing that, but also cancer patients. And, I quote this prayer just about every day. But it's God, grant me the serenity or peace to accept those things that I can't change. So there's that concept right there, right up front.
Yeah, it's recognizing that these are items that we can't change. And I thought it was interesting because you put it with the Serenity Prayer, and I love that, because now it's, well, what's the fruit of acceptance? And the fruit of acceptance isn't that you don't feel the loss, and it's not that it doesn't hurt, but serenity. God, grant me the serenity, the peace. And we have titled this podcast Cancer and Peace. And I think it's because it's not that the cancer necessarily is taken away, or the damage from that, or the suffering, but you can experience peace or serenity with acceptance of that which you can't change. And I think this is important for all of us to get to an understanding of. I think a lot of people want to rush through this grieving process. And part of that is because feeling the hard feelings or working through the harder areas, especially the sadness and depression, or feeling the anger, are forms of things that we've talked about quite a bit here. Is to actually feel that is a form of suffering, and we don't want to suffer. And so, but what we're talking about now is as we accept the loss, the suffering in our lives, we can actually move towards purpose or meaning or future. And that has hope. And that also, having hope brings peace. And we've talked a bunch about how hope and peace go together on this podcast. But hope can't be placed in something that's false. And that's why acceptance is so important, is if there's false hope, is similar to bargaining. Again, you're back in the bargaining phases. I'm hoping for something that can't happen because I'm bargaining. Well, if I do these things, maybe it'll change it. That's still in a grieving process. Acceptance is really something that I think I've seen in your life a bunch. Is why you do this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Is taking the loss that you've experienced and having it not be ignored or not felt. You've incorporated into your life, and now it has meaning in, it has purpose in my life. It's incorporated in. It's the cancer journey is part of your overall journey, and it affects what you find is important today, which I think today is sharing the hope that you find in Him, and where it comes from, and how one can find hope.
Yes.
So when you think about acceptance, it's not a moment. Do you have some thoughts about how you moved into acceptance in your own cancer journey and what it looked like? When was it acceptance that maybe you can look back now and go, I know that I'm here? Because a second ago you said you think you've got to acceptance. I'm going to bet it wasn't a snap, because that's another piece about it. It's like acceptance is more like a process, and you couldn't pick a moment in time usually to say, this is it.
Right.
But I'm interested in your experience.
I think in my case, it was a very long process because my cancer journey kept changing. I mean, for 10 years, it was surgical solutions and lots of surgeries to fix stuff from my major surgery, which was to remove the bladder and prostate. And, there was a major surgery where they had the appendix was plastered to this area and they had to redo everything. So there was, this, okay, we're going to pray about going into surgery, but everything's going to be fine. We're going to get the cancer, we're going to get it out if there is cancer. And, the major cancer event in 2005, that removed all the cancer. And so I had some grieving from that. But when in that 10 years later, when it became metastatic, that became an entirely different journey for me. This is just my own journey. And that's when I was in really a place of paralysis because of the fear and devastation and sadness, depression that I was in, and also anger. And so I did not know what to do with those emotions, right? Yeah. And so I was stuck in that, I wasn't grieving well because I didn't know how to grieve. I had never grieved before. So that's when our buddy brought the journal down. So expressing those emotions to be able to release them and be honest about what's going on in me, because I felt constrained as a person of faith, almost that I didn't have permission to feel fear or anger or sadness, that I should just look to the Lord and He, and He'll take it away, right? And yet I found out through that process that God wanted me to express those emotions. He was in those emotions, and put them out on the table, and then I'll look at them, take them out and put them on a shelf and look at those emotions and say, okay, what's behind them, and explore that. And then look at, this is the beauty of being a Christ follower, is that what Jesus has said and what the scriptures say is like meat to the soul when you're in that place of desperation and fear, because yes, it's great to express it, and the scripture is filled with people lamenting, expressing, but then there's also these scriptural truths that you can grab onto, and the Holy Spirit is active and working in that process. But even so, I still wasn't at an acceptance place yet, even through all that, through expressing and looking to the scriptures and all that. And so I think there was a shift at some point. I know it's not a switch that you turn on and off, acceptance, but there was a shift, and it happened when I experienced peace from expressing those emotions, looking at the scriptures, and then recognizing that no matter what happened, whether it was death or survival, that I would be in God's protection, that he is my refuge and strength, and that he was in this journey. This journey was part of his purpose and plan for my life. I didn't even think in this process that he would even use this as ministry. I was just trying to get to a point where I could survive. And I found in that process of surviving and grieving and going through all that I would even thrive in the loss of, my body was just so depleted. Mm-hmm. My relationships, some of them suffering, my faith going through I was disoriented in my relationship with the Lord. How could this be happening? I mean, I had a lot of dark nights of the soul with this whole part of the process of the cancer journey. And so acceptance to me was, okay, like a breath came out at first, it's like, okay. I think gratitude was kind of critical for me also. When I after I grieved quite a bit, and then I had a gratitude, I wasn't sugarcoating anything, but I had a gratitude list, and I'm like, okay, let me think about where I'm at right now and what God has done for me.
That's important because it's a reality step.
Yeah.
Because you're expressing forms of reality, which is a big part of your journal.
Yeah.
Was you called it expressing truths. And
yeah.
I want to highlight something else of what you said too, that I think it's an important part of knowing whether you're at acceptance. And you described feeling your emotions.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that I'll put myself, I was in this bucket, is the idea that I've got to acceptance because I no longer feel the great weight of this loss.
Yeah.
And that can be a misnomer for acceptance.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is it is possible to stuff your emotions and to not feel the loss. But what you've done is you've stored the loss. Rather than feel the loss, you've stored the loss in your inner person. Mm-hmm. And that's not acceptance, the way we're describing acceptance. Acceptance says that it's okay to feel and recognize the loss. If you're not willing to feel the loss, you haven't accepted the loss. What you've really said is that I'm going to ignore the loss, which is different than acceptance. Ignoring and turning your feelings off is different than acceptance. Acceptance is saying, no, the loss is real and I actually need to feel the loss. And when I feel the loss, then I can get to the peace area you're talking about. But I think there's a lot of people that are walking around thinking that they have grieved because they no longer feel the weight of the loss in the moments they're going on. It's like, well, hey, this person passed away, but what they've really done is they stuffed their feelings. Mm-hmm. And it's a form of denial as opposed to a form of acceptance. And they are very different from each other. And what they do to your inner person is very different.
So when in 2017, 2 years after, a year and a half after this major surgery where it became metastatic, I was sent home to do hospice care. And I had gone out to lunch with a pastor, and I had explained what was going on. And he said, well, what was my greatest sadness? And I said, it was leaving my kids at that point. And so he suggested going home and writing a letter. Mm-hmm. So it took me a week to write each letter because I have 6 kids. So, but I remember just weeping as I was writing the letter and having the memories, and then what did I want to say to them? And it wasn't just like recounting experiences. It was what my heart felt when I thought about that child. Yeah. And I even had like a little scripture verse at the end that I felt like some truth that I wanted to communicate. But I remember weeping, feeling great sadness because I was leaving. I was going to leave them. And sealing up the envelope, putting a date on it. But I thought that exercise was so wonderful at that time because I was able to weep through it and express what I've always wanted to say to him, let's say.
Yeah.
In it.
That's pretty good. Let's look at the opposite side of that, because I told a touch of the story last week, and I put a little more meat on the bone, and the story was when my granddad had passed. Now, my mom had passed from lung cancer a couple of years prior to this, and when I had experienced her death, I had this idea that I wasn't going to show emotion, and that's just the way I was. I'm going to say it's the way I was brought up. There's something that we talked about this before about, a strong person, doesn't need to show that, look how well they're handling this, was kind of this message that was out there. And so I was still living in that in a full sense. And so when my granddad had passed, I was telling the story about, I was studying with some college friends, and I wrote this first part out in the story where, I'm sitting there studying, and I get this phone call, and I put a lot more detail of what was happening at the time. I was, at the time, there was a lot of things happening in my life. I was running a small business. My wife was pregnant with her third child. I was studying for the CPA and working on my master's degree. And I had this, so there's like all these life things that are happening. So it's a busy time. And so we're studying with these group of people, and the phone rings, and my wife answers because she knows that, hey, we're trying to, and so she said, hey, you need to get this call. And it was my dad, and he was like, hey, your granddad has passed away, and the funeral's tomorrow. And so I was like, hey, thanks for the call. And I hung up, and my wife was like, hey, what was that about? And now my inner person had swallowed hard and was already like, hey, it was just my dad. And he said, granddad has passed away. And she was like, when's the funeral? It's like, well, it's tomorrow, and I remember feeling like this I gave her a tinge of anger back to let her know, don't go any further.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the reason why is because I was in my own head. I had this idea. It's like, I'm not going to discuss this process with you in front of these other people, these other students that are, just acquaintances coming from class. And I just had in my inner person just given that signal really strong, don't go any further. And she dropped it and left it there. And so as I swallowed that, and I went right back into studying with this group of people. And I used busyness, all those things I just listed earlier, and school and this moment to never feel that loss. Now, this person was one of the most important people in my life growing up. This person was a person that set a course for a lot of the way I think and act today. And I would dare say that, I would term this story when Superman died now. And the reason why is because the meaning of how his life impacted with mine is that I wanted to be him. And so I didn't ever grieve that, never felt that loss. So I stored it. Now, when I started writing the story, I felt it all of a sudden. And it wasn't, as you said a second ago, it wasn't just the circumstances of hearing about it. It was what I love you shared about it with your kids. It's like, oh no, I actually had to go. Now the next part of the story was, why was he meaningful? And then I started thinking about, it's like, well, he's the person who taught me how to fish. He was a guy in business who he owned, in my lifetime, 4 or 5 businesses, and I watched him build and sell businesses, and he was a lion. Like, he would show up at a place and he was respected. Like, people, like when he would never, he usually, I can remember car rides with him and just asking him questions, and he would answer questions with a question. He wouldn't, like, he had such wisdom in the way he would, like, well, have you thought about this? As opposed to what you need to do, he would just ask another questions like, have you thought about this? How would you approach this? And it was just such deep wisdom. And I recognized that, well, a sage died, somebody who I saw that, hey, represented what manhood looked like and all these things. And that's why he was Superman. And I didn't process those losses, the meaning of who he was, and then how that meaning just intersect with my life and how it shaped who I am today or who I was at that point in time. And it was all based on this idea that I couldn't show loss. I couldn't show emotion. And it was as if I had done a disservice though to, the meaning of his life by not grieving, say there was something important about those relationships that I turned off the importance of it and just said, I'm going to move on. I never felt it. I never grieved it. And I think that's something big about, that's why I'm so strong about it. Well, hey, saying you don't, it's not that I had sit around and for weeks and years going, I feel this now. It's like, no, I was able to turn the feelings off, but I buried it alive. And I think what we're talking about today is the way you just described when you processed your cancer journey is you reflected on the relationships, you wrote them down, you felt the loss, you grieved, but you also experienced the joy with it also, the meaning behind it, the purpose of them. And then you were able to express your heart in that purpose. And all of that built towards something much, much more healthy in grief, but it built towards acceptance, not denial.
So just back to you, how do you think, what place are you in today when you think about your grandfather's passing?
Well, I just started processing it. So I would say that there's a lot pent up experiences that I haven't processed the meaning. And you might ask, well, why is that important? And as I reflect on it, who I am, the way I think about the world, one of the things that I loved about his relationship was I remember he and my parents, when we would get together, they would sit out in the yard and chairs and discuss topics by the hour, and I would just sit in and listen into these conversations and just soak this up. And it was like how I thought about the world. I didn't realize how influenced I was by listening to their conversations and what was important about the different aspects of life and whether it be politics or business or religion. Those conversations were shaping, and I didn't know I was being shaped at that point in time. But when I look back and now just to reflect on it, now I recognize, well, I picked up a lot of his values, good and bad. And I just think about some of the things that he would do and the things that he had passions for. And I have some similar passions, whether it be business. One of my favorite things is he had on his desk, he had this sign that says, "Was the business you minded today your own?" It was like, that's stuck in my head.
Yeah.
But you hear the emotion here because it hasn't been processed. Like, to think about the relationship and the meaning, if it hasn't been processed, it's like, well, there's something there and it's stored. And so having not processed that, the beauty and even the hard stuff. And I have a hard story or two that I had this great story of my brother and I. He had us do the exact same job. We were picking up stuff. Maybe I think it might have been dog poop in the backyard, to be honest with you, because he had set a golf green out there at some point in time, and he had a really cool dog. And so we both did the same job. We did about the same amount of stuff, and we got back, and he paid my brother, I think, 75 cents, and he gave me 50 cents. We're talking, way back when, but for this job, and I was pissed. It's like, I did the exact same thing he did. How come? And he was like, he's older. He's got more experience. And I was like, yeah, but I did the exact same amount that he did. And it was just this anger that I had towards him because he would give my brother something different than I, even though I did the same amount of work. And he was like, "You're going to figure that's the way the world works, son," and it was just, he had just ideas about the way he would approach things that were completely different than I would expect. And, but I remember that in a lot of detail and how it made me feel towards him, because he was my hero, and all these things are bubbling up inside, and they're important experiences, and they're important because they've shaped who I am. And if I want to know myself, I have to be willing to enter those experiences.
So let me ask you this: to enter into them and process them, will you be writing them down? What are you going to do?
Yes, absolutely. I've already started writing them down. That's the point. We do this in story work, and so I wrote down the other story, but then I started writing down the experiences of hey, why is this person Superman? It's not because he was just a man and he was older. It's like, no, I tried to emulate him, and I saw that lion aspects, and I had experiences of him being a lion. And I remember trying to go buy a business myself when I was in my young 20s, and he went with me. And he just stood in the background, and then he asked me questions about how I approached this person about buying this business. And it was absolutely fascinating to have somebody who had that much wisdom and knowledge, who had done so much business and bought and sold in his life, and to have that. He didn't try to do it. He watched me do it. And then he asked me questions about it. But he's like, hey, you approach this in many ways the way I would have. And it was because I watched him, for many years. And it was just a fascinating, to recognize I am, a part of who I am is him, the way he interacted with the world. And now I know myself more because I've took time to process, think about, and write down some of those experiences.
That's great.
And this is acceptance, though. It's the acceptance doesn't mean, I don't think for some time I've been trying to bring him back to life. But acceptance is saying he is dead and his life impacts mine. And it affects who I am today. And it has meaning to me. And I need to incorporate it into who I am today, and not try to bring him back to life, but to live from the memories and the experiences and the joys and the relationships, and still know that he's dead.
Yeah.
And that is a great loss, because it's a great loss to lose Superman.
Yeah. Your hero.
Yeah, at that time I
definitely... Who shaped you so much.
Yeah, at that time I would say definitely so.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so I think in the cancer journey, there's the necessary grieving. I love it because you introduced the whole topic by talking about bookends, let's just say, right?
Yeah.
Not that there's a linear, it feels linear to me at times, but you bounce back and go through some of those other things. But acceptance comes to a certain degree in a place after have felt your feelings, process them, and, get to that point where there's something, it's not stored anymore. Like you were saying, it's something that has to be let go, let out, processed, felt, dealt with, and, dealt with in the sense of acknowledging it, recording it in some fashion, whatever feels right. For me, it is to record, usually to write it down, what I'm feeling and what I'm, just to process and to record what I am going through. But to get to that point where, okay, this is where I'm at. And this is, for me as a Christ follower, this is what God has to say, but this is where I'm at. And I feel so much better about being in that place where I'm at. I'm a 20-year cancer patient. I've had this horrific journey, over 50 surgery, all the stuff that we've talked about, 7 years of systemic treatment, 6 recurrences, all these things that have happened. It's hard to really describe a journey like this. It's not that I'm saying to listeners or to myself, aren't you something else? It's I'm saying, wow, this has been a horrific journey. I don't know why I've gone through this long of a cancer journey with so many things, but I'm at the point where I've accepted this long, drawn out journey. And now, as in that place of acceptance, I see such value that has come out of it, for me personally, but also for my family and for others. And I even see ministry out of it, which is crazy. Going through it, I didn't see anything that I would actually be able to comfort others with the same comfort that I had received. But there's this concept of, okay, here I am, this lung cancer survivor, and there is hope. There is this expected hope, and I'm going to share that hope with others because it's brought me such comfort,
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I think when you're living out of the impact of the loss,
Yep.
That's a strong form of acceptance. And when it's shaping, one of the key things and the reason why the recovery principle aspects of this are important. And you brought the Serenity Prayer of accepting the things you cannot change. But we also turn our lives and our wills over to Christ's care and control in recovery. But I still want to tie this back to the 8th principle or the 12th step. And that is that we practice these principles in all of our affairs. And in many ways, what we're talking about today is we're practicing the grief in all of our affairs. In other words, what we've grieved and what I just described with my own granddad, and it affects all of the way I think and act and live my life. And so we're practicing out of how well we grieve in many ways. And so it's this 12th step of practicing principles in all of our affairs. So much of the time, I think we just think about it as just when we're in recovery, we think it's, we're going to not fix or like the guidelines, or, we're going to do some of the recovery principles we've learned. But what we're really saying in many ways is that the recovery journey affects all of the things that I do in my life and affairs. And if I grieve well, then I get to an understanding that, I can actually bring the good things from the grief process. And you just described a second ago that there are platforms and opportunities and doors that were opened that came from the suffering journey of cancer. And you've embraced that, and now it affects all your affairs, the way you do life, and how you think about your purpose. And so much of the time, I think this gets to the last part there, is that it incorporates into your purpose. What's the purpose of your life, Peter? And then you're going, well, hey, something in my grieving process helps me to understand that now, where without grieving, we may be like a rudderless ship that we don't know our purpose, but this really has brought a lot of clarity.
Yeah.
Because and I'll give the example for your life. It's like, you could have said, hey, my purpose is to be a great attorney and to practice law at the highest level. And then when you get to the end of life, would you really say that's the purpose that you would want put on your headstone? I'm going to guess the answer is no. And what you've learned by the grieving process, the recovery process, and the cancer process is that relationships, because you just described, hey, I wrote a letter to all my kids. And I recognized that if I could connect deeply with the value of that relationship in my life by grieving this loss, I think it has enriched you such a place that your purpose now has much more to do with relationships than it ever did.
Yeah. I mean, how can I relate to the pain and suffering of others unless I have felt that pain and suffering?
Yeah.
And so not traveling in false hope, but doing the grieving process.
So grieving has affected your purpose in such a way that now it's energizing something that's so important about who you are. And so, and that's the encouragement of that. Acceptance doesn't mean that you don't feel a loss of cancer, the pain, but it certainly does mean that you've calculated it in since you've captured all of its meaning, and now you're embracing it to what does it mean to my future?
Yeah.
And that's acceptance of that layer, I think, in a big way.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for sharing.
Yep. So those are the big concepts I think I wanted to put out there today. So
thank you.
We thank everyone for listening.
Blessings.